Hello students, welcome to all. This is Dr. Vignesh Varnekha, lecturer in geography, Government Degree College for Women's, Begumpet, Hyderabad. In this session, we are going to discuss about volcanoes, causes, types and their distribution. This is the third video regarding the module volcanoes. Points to be covered in this session, that is in part 3 video of volcanoes, are types of volcanoes on the basis of periodicity. In this we are going to discuss about active volcanoes, dormant volcanoes, extinct volcanoes, and then geysers and hot springs, followed by the distribution of volcanoes across the world. In this we are going to discuss about the first ring of fire distribution, middle continental belt, mid-Atlantic belt, and interplate volcanoes. Thereby we are going to discuss about the effects of volcanoes. The effects are going to be discussed in two ways, that is destructive effects of volcanoes and the positive effects of volcanoes. Now let us start with the types of volcanoes on the basis of the eruption periodicity. On the basis of period of eruption and time interval between two eruptions of volcanoes can be divided into three types. They are 1. Active volcanoes, 2. dormant volcanoes, and 3. the extinct volcanoes. Now let us discuss about these three types of volcanoes in detail. First, let us start with the active volcanoes. The volcanoes from whose vents there is constant ejection of volcanic material such as lava, volcanic ashes, volcanic gases, and fragmental material, etc., are known as active volcanoes. In view of volcanologists, an active volcano is a volcano which has shown eruption activity within recorded history. Some of the active volcanoes are continually in eruption, while in other cases the eruptions are intermittent. According to Forrester, at present there are about 500 plus active volcanoes in the world, and most of them are being in the Pacific Ocean and in the Atlantic Highlands. Besides, there are other active submarine volcanoes whose number it is difficult to determine since they are inside the ocean. A few examples of active volcanoes are Anak Krakatoa in Indonesia, Mount Etna in Sicily, Mount Vesuvius in Italy, Mount Pelee in Martinique, Mount Carmine in Alaska, Mount St. Helens, Nevada del Ruiz in Colombia, Mount Unzen in Japan, Mount Pinatubo in Philippines, Mount Red Hot in Alaska, Mount Mayon in Philippines, and Beran Island in Andaman Nicobar Islands of India is the only active volcano in India. The Stromboli volcano, which emits continuous fire and incandescent gases, that is known as the lighthouse of the Mediterranean Sea. Besides, active volcanoes are found in Alaska, Aleutian Islands, Kamchatka, the Kuril Islands, the Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, and the other groups of islands. The figure on the screen discloses you about the major active volcanoes across the world. Let us discuss about the dormant volcanoes, the another type of volcanoes on the basis of the uh, interval of eruptions. The volcanoes which remain quiet after their eruption for some time, or which do not show any sign of volcanic activity for a long time, but there is a possibility of eruption in future. And such type of volcanoes are known as the dormant volcanoes. It means the volcanoes are in a state of inactivity. According to volcanologists, a dormant volcano is a volcano which has not shown eruptive activity within recorded history, but shows the signs of eruptive activity within the recent geologic past. In other words, a dormant volcano is somewhere between active and extinct state, that is in sleeping mode. But all of a sudden, there will be an explosive eruption with the result that there would be unimaginable loss of life and property also. It should be noted that whenever a dormant volcano develops as an active one, the eruption is apt to be extremely violent, but during the period of quiet type, the lava in the channel has solidified and given rise to an obstacle which only a great and violent explosion can remove. It is worth mentioning that the violent eruptions of such dormant volcanoes are generally preceded and accompanied by the earthquakes, some of which have been very destructive also. Mount Kilimanjaro, which is a stratovolcano in Tanzania, and Mount Fuji in Japan are the fine examples of the dormant volcanoes. And third one is the extinct volcano. When the eruption of a volcano is completely ceased or stopped, with no indications of future eruption or volcanic activity, such kind of volcano is known as an extinct volcano. In other words, it is a volcano which has not shown any historic activity, is usually deeply eroded, and does not show any signs of recent activity. How old must be a volcano to be considered extinct depends to a large degree on past activity. In extinct type, the crater is covered with the water. The crater is covered with the water and crater lakes are formed. Although we must remember that many of these are considered dormant, may become active any day, anytime, as no one knows what is happening below the surface of the earth. A few examples of extinct volcanoes are Chushu Palau, Red in Philippines, Philippine Sea, Oscarin in Peru, Mount Buninyong in Australia, and Narcondam Island in Andaman Nicobar Islands of India. This is the only extinct volcano in India. It may be pointed out that it is rather difficult to classify definitely a volcano as active, dormant, or extinct. Some of the volcanoes are today dormant, may become active tomorrow. Montezuma was considered an extinct volcano by the inhabitants of Pompeii and Herculaneum in 79 because it had been inactive for 700 years at in that year, that is up to that is in AD 79. And then there was a disastrous eruption, volcanic eruption by the Pompeii. How a volcano becomes extinct or inactive is associated with the movement of plates. As we know, a volcano can form over the hot spot, but because the plate is moving, the volcano is carried away from its source of magma after a few million years and becomes inactive. It is replaced at the hot spot by a new volcano a short distance away. There are a chain of volcanoes and volcanic islands presents. Before a volcano becomes an extinct, it passes through a vanning stage during which steam and other hot gases and vapors are exhaled. And these are known as the fumaroles or solfataras, which we will discuss in the next, which we have discussed in the previous session. Now, we will go with the geysers and the hot springs. Water that percolated into the porous rocks is subjected to intense heat by the underlying hard rock, which is in contact with hot magma, that is molten rock material in the mantle or in the lower part of the earth crust. Under the influence of intensive heat, the water in the capillaries and narrow roots in the porous rock undergoes into intensive expansion and gets converted to a steam, resulting in high pressure coming onto the surface. When the steam or water at high pressure finds a path to the surface through a narrow vent and weak zones appear at the surface, then they are called as geysers and hot water springs. Now, let us discuss about the differences between geyser and hot spring or hot water spring. Geysers and hot water springs. Steam or water at high pressure along its path gets accumulated in small reservoirs, fissures and fractures. Once the pressure exceeds the threshold limit, the steam bursts out to the surface, disrupting the water at the mouth. Hence the name geyser is given. Steam or water at high pressure smoothly flows to the top through the vent and condenses at the surface, giving rise to a spring or hot spring. And geysers, silicate deposits at mouth give them their distinct colors. Whereas in hot springs, some springs are very colorful because of the presence of cyanobacteria of different colors. In general, geysers are located near active volcanoes or volcanic areas. Island is famous for its geysers. Steam or water at high pressure found all across the world. That is the hot springs. Usually, a crater-like structure is created at the mouth of both the geysers and hot springs. The figure on the screen discloses you about geysers, hot springs, and fumaroles, mud spas, etc. And another figure on the screen discloses you about the distribution of major geysers in the world. It is found from the figure on the screen is that almost all the world's geysers are confined to three major areas. One is Ireland, two is New Zealand, and three is Yellowstone National Park of the United States of America. Now, the distribution of volcanoes in the world or across the world. Most known volcanic activity and the earthquakes occur along converging plates or the plate boundaries or margins and mid-oceanic ridges. Around 80% of the volcanic activity is found along subduction boundaries. Mid-oceanic ridges, mid-ocean spreading centers and continental rifts account for about 15% of volcanic activity. Rest is in intra-plate volcanism. Since the 16th century, around 4,000 plus volcanoes have been reported to be active. Of these, nearly 4,000 are located in and around the Pacific Ocean, and about 80 are in the mid-world belt across the Mediterranean Sea, Alpine Himalayan belt, and in the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. Belts of the highest concentration of volcanoes are Aleutian Kuril Islands Arc, Melanesia, and New Zealand Tonga Belt. And it is very clearly found from the figure on the screen, which discloses you about the distribution of volcanoes across the world. The distribution of volcanoes in the world can be studied in the following four belts. They are 1. Pacific Ring of Fire, 2. Mid-continental belt, 3. Mid-Atlantic belt, and 4. Intraplate volcanoes belt. Firstly, we will look into the Pacific Ring of Fire. The Circum-Pacific region, popularly termed as the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is also known as the fire girdle of the Pacific Ocean, has the greatest concentration of active volcanoes. Volcanic belt and earthquake belt closely overlap along the Pacific Ring of Fire. The regions with active volcanism along the Pacific Ring of Fire are the Aleutian Islands into Kamchatka, Japan, the Philippines and Indonesia, that is in Java, Sumatra, and particular regions, Pacific Islands of Solomon, New Hebrides, Tonga, North Island, and New Zealand, Andes to Central America, particularly Guatemala, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Mexico, and right up to the Alaska in the north. The top five countries with the most volcanoes are the one, United States of America with 173. Most of them are in Alaska states. The second is Russia with 166 volcanoes. Third is Indonesia with 139 volcanoes. Fourth is Ireland with 130 volcanoes. And fifth is Japan with 112 volcanoes in the first figuring of 5. The second one is the mid-continental belt. This belt is also known as the volcanic zone of convergent continental plate boundaries or margins. A few basaltic volcanoes of fissure eruption type also takes place along the mid-oceanic ridge where the seafloor spreading is in progress. This belt comprises of the volcanoes of Alpine Mountains, Mediterranean Sea, and the volcanoes of fault zone of East Africa. Here the volcanoes are cast due to the collision of African, Eurasian and Indian plates. The famous volcanoes of the Mediterranean Sea are Vesuvius, Stromboli, which is also known as the lighthouse of the Mediterranean, and those of Aegean Highlands are come in this belt. The important volcanoes of the fault zone of East Africa are the East Africa Rift Valley, Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Elgin, Mount Meru, and Mount Kenya, etc. And another one distribution belt of volcanoes is the mid-Atlantic volcanoes belt. A few basaltic volcanoes of the fissure eruption type also takes place along the mid-oceanic ridge where the sea spreading is also in progress. These volcanoes are mainly of fissure eruption type. These volcanoes mostly occur along the divergent plate boundaries of margins. The important volcanic areas include the volcanoes of West Indies Islands, Lesser Antilles Islands, Southern Antilles Islands, Azores Islands, and St. Helena Islands in the Atlantic Ocean. And the fourth is that intraplate volcanoes or intraplate volcanic belts. Besides the above said three zones of Pacific Ring of Fire, mid-continental belt and mid-oceanic ridge belt, the other volcanoes belt is a intraplate volcanoes. There are other volcanoes which are scattered and found in the inner parts of the continents. They occur in the middle of the plate boundaries where the magma exists from weaknesses in the Earth's interior or Earth's surfaces. The Hawaiian Islands are the best examples for the hotspot volcanoes. Now the volcanoes in India. There are no volcanoes in the Himalayan region or the Indian Peninsula except in Andaman Nicobar Islands. Barren Island, the only active volcano in India, located in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which became active in the 1990s. It is now considered as an active volcano after its spewed lava and ash in 2017. The other volcanic island in the Indian territory is Narkondam, which is about 150 kilometers northeast of Barren Island, it is probably extinct. It is dead. And its crater wall has been destroyed. Now we will go with the effects of volcanoes or the impacts of the volcanoes. The main types of volcanic hazards or the impacts can be studied into two ways. They are one, destructive effects of volcanoes, and two is the positive effects of volcanoes. Let us discuss each of these volcanoes in detail. Now the first is the destructive effects of volcanoes. The showers of cinders and bombs, volcanic bombs, can cause damage to life. For example, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in AD 79. Tsunamis can be generated and large water bodies due to the violent eruption of volcanoes. For example, Anak Krakatau eruption in 1883. The collapse of volcanic landforms in seas and ocean causes tsunamis. The best example is Sunda Strait tsunami in 2018. The ash from a larger eruption dispersing over a large area can lower temperatures at a regional or global scale. This could trigger the famines on a large scale also. The eruption of the Mount Chambora in 1815 is the best example. In Hawaiian type eruption, a single flow spreads widely over open slopes or down the valleys as lava rivers, engulfing entire cities, leading to the loss of life and property. Lahars are a violent type of mud flows or debris flows can bury entire cities in a matter of minutes, causing a high number of casualties. For example, the eruption of Nevado del Ruiz volcano in 1985. The sudden collapse of lava domes can cause violent volcanic flows. Volcanic flows that destroy everything on their path. The best example for this is the eruption of Mount Pili in 1902. The powerful winds drive the gas plume higher into the atmosphere and carry it to a greater distance, disrupting air travel. This happened in 2010 when a stratovolcano in Helen erupted and disrupted air travel over entire Europe for a few weeks. A super eruption can cause a small scale extinction event. For example, the Toba eruption in Indonesia triggered a dramatic global winter about 74,000 years ago. The volcanoes also leads to the acid rains and ozone destruction. The volcanic gases that pose the greatest potential hazard to people, animals, agriculture, and property are the sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen fluoride. Locally, sulfur dioxide gas can lead to a acid rain and air pollution downwind from a volcano. that can be appeared in the that you can see in that uh, impact of the volcanism as in the form of acid rain in the figure that appears on the screen in the left side. Globally, large explosive eruptions that inject a tremendous volume of sulfur aerosols into the stratosphere can lead to a lower surface temperatures and promote depletion of the Earth ozone layer, as shown in the figure that appears on the screen right side. Now the positive effects of volcanoes. Volcanism creates a new fertile landforms like highlands, plateaus, volcanic mountains, etc. For example, Deccan Traps in India, in southern India. The volcanic ash and the volcanic dust are very fertile for farms and orchards. Volcanic rocks yield very fertile soil upon weathering and decomposition of the rock. Although steep volcano slopes prevent extensive agriculture, forestry operations on them provide valuable timber resources also. The mineral resources, particularly metallic ores, are brought to the surface by volcanoes from the inside. Sometimes copper and other ores fill the gas bubbles cavities. The felt kimberlite rock of South Africa, the source of diamonds, is the pipe of an ancient volcanic vent. In the vicinity of active volcanoes, water is in depth or heated from contact with the hot magma, that is molten rock material, giving rise to the springs, hot springs and geysers. The Puga Valley, okay, the heat from the Earth's interior in areas of volcanic activity is used to generate geothermal electricity or geothermal power. Countries producing geothermal power are the United States of America, Russia, Japan, Italy, New Zealand, and Mexico. The Puga Valley in Ladakh region and Manikaran in Himachal Pradesh are the promising spots in India for the generation of geothermal electricity. The geothermal potential can also be used for the space heating. As scenic features of great beauty, attracting a heavy tourist trade, a few landforms outrank volcanoes. At several places, national parks have been set up centered around volcanoes. For example, the Yellowstone National Park in the United States of America. As a source of crushed rock for concrete aggregate or railroad ballast and other engineering purposes, lava rock is often extensively used. Dear students, so far we have discussed the following points in this session. The types of volcanoes on the basis of periodicity, geysers and hot springs, distribution of volcanoes across the world, and effects of volcanoes, both destructive and as well as positive effects. In the next session, I will be in front of you with another lesson. Till then, stay home, stay safe. Thank you, one and all, and thank you very much.